Um, uh, Someone wanted a discussion to be had about why there is a gender disparity in the creation of cults. And subsequently, in this particular idea, a religion is a cult with a higher population and a tax exempt status. So, why is there a gender disparity in cult leadership? There are examples of cults that were founded by women. Um, these of them are particularly nice. One's Bernard Blatsky, and the other one is Linda Hamilton Boone. Outside of that, there doesn't appear to be any information available. You've got some that'd be nice on cults founded by women. Um, in both cases, you're dealing with different psychological profiles of the cult leader. So we'll just use them as an example of cults created by women, and to see if there's any difference as it relates to cults created by men. Then we might get to a more general discussion of why cults are created in general. This is by the way, this is a advertisement for Knitting Cult Lady. She can probably help you with that a bit better, but we'll chuck in a few ideas, see if that helps. So, Linda Hamilton Boone was a crazy person from Victoria in Australia. He's sometime in the 50s and 60s or 70s or something, early 80s or something like that. She ran for some time. Where she was faking adoption papers um, to nick other people's kids and have them join a cult. And she was nicking blonde haired, blue eyed kids and calling it the Great White Brotherhood. And and had some ideas that she incidentally gotten from Vlatsky via the Theosophists and a couple of other groups. And we're sort of mishmashing them together in a cult environment. Um, Incidentally, in case you're wondering, Julian Assange's stepfather, to which he got that name, was a member of that cult. Um, some of Mr. Assange's upbringing in the Victorian era might have been influenced by that. It's probably also the case um, that leaving that cult is and becoming more obsessed with computers during that era, and eventually being the first person in Australian history to be arrested for computer crime at the age of 17, um, is part of Julian Assange's profile as someone who's trying to reject some kind of cult programming and conditioning. He had plenty of it. And so through that. So that cult's no more, thankfully. It's a bit creepy, isn't it? The other one is obviously where the Neo-Theosophists came from, which was Madame Blavatsky in the 1880s, was someone who was cult conditioned as a co-mason, but left her husband and decided to become a cult leader instead of a cult follower, and so engaged in a sort of white supremacist attitude by ripping off ideas from Hindus and taking them out of context and misleading people in her documentation in such a manner that it's you can see, for example, that Asuras and Devas are not the same as angels and demons. Um, However, it turns out that you can see it as far as the words are concerned. You can see there's a history there with Zoroastrianism and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean there's a secret doctrine or whatever. There's actually very different ideas going on there, and she's taken them out of context and she's just put new sticky labels on them and come up with a bunch of other shit, which eventually led to an idea in the 1970s about an alien hierarchy being behind the root races and racist notions about how certain ethnicities have um, certain alien spiritual origins, which is offensive. Okay, now Blavatsky didn't specifically say that as far as we know in Secret Doctrine, but as a consequence of her idea of root racism and whatever else, other groups have picked up on that and it's led to that. It wasn't Great White Brotherhood that had that idea. It was other groups in the 1970s. So a sort of cult phenomena is quite dangerous to people's well-being. Those two people have contributed to racism. They've contributed to, as far as we know, the children in the Great White Brotherhood cult in Victoria were not necessarily maltreated. We don't actually know of any cases where they were specifically maltreated. If they were, please say so. They might have been. They might have been. Assange might have been maltreated in that cult as well. So we'll put it out there. Nonetheless, we don't actually know of any specific cases of people in the Blatsky Theosopha school in India or whatever that were specifically maltreated in that particular way. However, psychological and conditioning and cult conditioning is a type of mind control and abuse in its own, because it can lead people to not necessarily think critically and sort of do that dear leader crap. Some of the characteristics of that is that behaviour is that Vladsky wasn't motivated by the same things that Linda Hamilton Byrne was motivated by. They say that watched a video on Linda Hamilton Byrne about 6 months ago or a year ago or something like that, and it was quite interesting because it seemed like that particular individual was they'll say in the video something about her being motivated by the inability to become a parent and having grown up in an orphanage herself, and sort of like they're playing on the victim becomes the perpetrator model, which couldn't be further from the truth. Most people who grow up in orphanages don't start cults and do horrible things like that, so that doesn't make any sense. There appears to be specific characteristics of her psychological profile that distinguished her from other people with similar upbringings, and as a consequence, that led to that particular behavioural outcome. And with Blatsky, it would have been the same thing. It's easy to envision someone in late 1800s Georgian society, which is where Blatsky was from, to have those women in the throes of the early stages of the first wave feminism, which was women's suffrage movement, the right to vote. Well, actually, the men didn't have the right to vote yet, so they were pushing for that as well. Anyway, actually, technically the men didn't have the right to vote yet. But anyway, but the early stages of that, in a sort of Marxist Bolshevik, the building of the Marxist and Bolshevik context, that was the idea of the questions about gender inequality were also raised by the Marxists. It wasn't a central part of their ideas, but they were raising the idea about how it related to notions of class. And so in that particular environment, someone who was a lackey for the state's agenda through, well, actually, that's not true. That's what the Masons became after the 1950s. It's not what they were in the late 1800s. Actually, in the late 1800s, her husband's or ex-husband's branch of Masonry was similar to other groups that actually they were actually organising worker strikes, and having discussions about Marxism, even though they weren't supposed to, because you can't talk about politics or religion at the lodge. Well, that's what they say now. Actually, in the 1400s, Masonry was founded as a workers' guild, as workers' guilds. But anyway, if she's adopted that sort of like esoteric type look at it, then it sounds like her ex-husband was was an Esquire Mason. He wasn't from the workers' guild ones at all, which means she wasn't talking about Marxism and issues of gender equality and stuff like that, which maybe means she felt cheated somehow. She wanted to get away from that co-masonry stuff and become a leader in her own right, because maybe she felt offended by that. Maybe there was something in Georgian society, which is Georgia is a country not too far from Russia. Maybe she felt that the women were being left out somehow. That the status as co-masons were, second class, and she wasn't happy about it. Maybe she thought that the principles of leadership included in cult indoctrination, and she wanted to pretend like she had knowledge about all the cults and she was smarter and better than all of them, and they could all get stuffed. in which case those two individuals have drastically different motives. Um, um, here's another cult that got founded much later in the 1960s, the Raelians. The Raelians, about the aliens from outer space. They are where the idea of cults typically promise space exploration and talk about aliens from outer space, UFO cult, where that idea comes from. Actually, cults in ancient times didn't necessarily have anything to do with UFOs, but the Raelians definitely did. And the Raelians were a French cult initially, and they argued that God was a female alien from outer space, among other things, and that put them at odds with a lot of other things. So people like cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. But it was the era of the trippy hippie and the funny cigarettes, and so that could be how some of the ideas in the 1970s in California, perhaps, of the root races being aliens from outer space came into effect. Maybe Raelians were talking to Theosophists, maybe. Maybe they had a yarn up with the Scientologists as well, because is what L. Ron Hubbard did. L. Ron Hubbard was a failed science fiction author who made a bet with his friend that he could make more money selling his crappy sci-fi novels if he branded them as a religion. And the sad part is, he did quite successfully. Okay, so what distinguishes male cults from female cults? Well, male-led cults typically involve a lot more rape. No, really. Okay? No, seriously. If you have a look at those arseholes sitting there in those cult communes and stuff like that, okay, just like that woman, Ninny cult lady said, admittedly she was naked at the time, which made it more interesting, but okay, Bernays was onto something, was he? Right, anyway, Edward Bernays, history of marketing and advertising. Anyway. Well, anyway, the freaking man was there, right? Okay, in the 60s, okay, right? You know, like the cult model that Musk has adopted and Trump has adopted is exactly like that. Here's what Musk said. To Sinclair or something like that. Someone did a video that said that outing. Sinclair's outed Elon, right? And she's gone. Oh, everyone, did you know that? Here's some text messages from Elon saying that there's going to be an artificial intelligence apocalypse, and the way for humanity to survive that is to get onto rockets to Mars. And of course, Elon has the rockets to Mars, and he knows all about the AI apocalypse because he was creating it with his buddies. Ride his rocket to Mars. Ride his rocket to Mars, right? What about Trump? Trump's got a bunch of people, David Packman was saying that. Trump's got a bunch of people, right, going up to his White House, praying and calling him the fucking Messiah. So Musk has Texreal cult, TECSREAL cult, right? In Nerd Rock podcast talks about that. And Trump has that. And Knitting cult lady must be working overtime at the moment. We'll help her. We'll put in some effort here. Hey, knitting cult lady, we'll help you out a little bit. Putting in some effort, trying to help out here. People like her must be working bloody overtime with shit like that. They're going to make a lot of money from their books too. A lot of money. Meanwhile, the community's going to go going, yeah, we noticed. So what's some of the characteristics of Trump and Musk that are similar to other male cult leaders that have come before? Well, petulance. They're petulant, the petulant narcissists that are known for throwing tantrums. They have a history of treating other people as extensions of themselves. They have insider-outsider complex. Although in Musk's case, it's him versus everyone. Go on. Trump. Trump is said to have been raised by a sociopath named Fred Trump, right? That's what Mary Trump reckons. We'll take her word on the subject. She is talking about her own family when she says that, so she know him a bit better, you assume so. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so Fred Trump Jr., who's Mary's father, didn't turn out like Donald because Fred Trump Sr., the sociopath, was playing favourites. And Donald was the favourite because he was exhibiting more sociopathic characteristics. Oh, okay. Okay. So Fred Jr. wasn't the favourite, okay. But he also didn't turn out sociopathic. Pays not to be the favourite then, doesn't it? Why would you want to be the favourite one in that situation? That's like saying, unless you're saying the chosen one, turns out to be the bad guy. Come on, Mary, you've considered that. Surely. Oh, he's the chosen one, is he? Look at him, he's the chosen one, he's the favourite. Of what? Is there some kind of program going on to show people maybe that Christian nationalism is a cult? Maybe, just maybe, those people are cult conditioned to worship the feet of the people who are screwing them over. Yeah, this is where the Democrats come in again. That they've been saying that the big beautiful bill, which is what Trump called it, is of course a corporate sham. There are commentators in the USA that are complaining that they are concerned that it even contains things that take people back to the 1950s. Like they're actually worried about things like women not being able to sign their own checking accounts and their husband having to do it or something like that. Like it's that level of ridiculousness that they're concerned about. Now we don't know if those are overblown fears the Americans have or if that's actually in their legislation, but they reckon it's got something to do with Project 2025. It's like, wait, they had Christian women go pray to that man and say he was the Messiah when he wants to take away their right to manage their own affairs. Well, that's what they reckon anyway. Don't understand how you can fall for that unless you're in a cult. that sounds like they're crazy. On the other hand, what about the cult of the Democrats? Now, be fair. In the cult of the Democrats, they can do no wrong, and the Republicans can never do anything right. It's always catastrophizing. It's always the worst case scenario. Okay, then. Was it like that in previous Republican administrations? Did they do that under any of the George Bushes? There was 2 of them. Did they say that about Senator John McCain when he ran for president? Did they say that about Reagan? Did they say that about Nixon? Did they say that about Abraham Lincoln? Well, probably not. The Democrats, as it turns out, were founded after Abraham Lincoln died, so there's that. As for Nixon, he really was a crook. And as for Reagan, well, a lot of people was worshipping the ground he walked on. They thought, well, they weren't really worshipping the ground he walked on. They thought he was a nice bloke. Heck, he was someone Arnold Schwarzenegger was modelling after, wasn't he? Another actor from California, turned politician. What about the Bushes? Oh, there was concern about them. But Biden, no. No, not Biden, sorry, not Biden. John McCain, sorry. Biden's a Democrat. John McCain. Haven't heard anything about people saying, oh, John McCain was a corrupt wannabe dictator who, was friends with the KKK and wanted to have Christian nationalism as public policy. Never heard that, but he was a Republican. Did hear that someone went, oh, Sarah Palin's probably a bit of a Jackie Lambie type character. Right? Okay? For the Australians out there. Don't really know a lot about Sarah Palin, but heard that somewhere. Okay, then. Okay. So was John McCain a ultra-conservative Fruit Loop that was planning on wheeling back people's rights and the purposes of taxation, which is, things like pensions or something like that. To the point where only corporations got tax benefits and no one else got anything. Well, if he were, they weren't screaming about it, were they? What were they screaming about during George Bush Jr.'s administration? September 11, September 11, September 11. Oh, and then he brought the Patriot Act in. That's nice. So there's been successive administrations that have done dodgy stuff, Democrats, about the Republicans, but there's something very personal about the Trump one. Like it's him, the man. He's a bad person. And yet Project 2025 was written by a group of people. Admittedly, they do characterise those individuals according to their conduct. I mean, J.D. Vance and Hegseth, or whatever, Pete Hegseth or whatever his name is, had something to do with Signalgate. Are the Democrats catastrophising? No. They're not. See, the thing, if you understand the sort of dynamic that those characters are part of, they're from the rip your country of its resources and fucking crap all over you fucking cult. America is their mother, and their mother must breastfeed them, and then they'll poop and vomit all over her face. Okay? Isn't it horrible to have to do that, to have to say it that way? When that's offensive to children. Children don't run dictatorships. Children don't run corporate schemes. Children don't become presidents and then accept $400 million golden airplanes and then have a cologne brand. Do they? So where does that cult attitude come from? It comes from other cults. In Trump's case, it comes from the cult of the 1950s. The cult of a woman's got one job, and that's to cook you dinner and clean up after you. That's where that cult comes from. Is it any wonder that they're having troubles over there? When that was the expectations of grown men. It sounds like it's petulance that's coming from a childlike mind, but it's nothing of the sort. It is actually cultural conditioning from the 1950s about how men see women. From that era. Maybe. What's happening is that they're not really petulant man babies, because that's an insult to babies. They're men. They're just men with bad attitudes. Men with dementia. Men with Alzheimer's. Men who were raised in toxic social environments. He got rewarded due to 1980s corporatism for their bad behaviour. Were propped up by an unjust, corrupt system. And they're sitting there saying, well, he can do what he wants. What are you going to do about it? Because he got told, Mr. Trump did, for the last 78 years of his life, that was acceptable conduct. As millions of men around the world, billions of men even, went, oh yeah, that was pretty lousy. He doesn't want to have to micromanage a woman's affairs. He would like to manage his own affairs. She's an adult. He doesn't need the added burden and responsibility. And she doesn't need the demeaning condescension of it either. And why not? Why not allow her to have a job? It brings in extra money to the household. Heck, he might even take some time off. He might work part-time. His life be easier for it, not harder. But no. The USA is in a cult of pretending just like the United Kingdom and other countries that are similar to that. You know, Middle East and wherever else, China, Russia. They're in a cult of men who were raised with that social conditioning in that era, who were able to benefit from that, unlike the other men, didn't change their worldview, and then decided to slap everyone on the face on their way out of this world because they were too stubborn to see that they were fucking wrong. You know what it is? It's the cult of stubborn old men not knowing that they are wrong and they're not allowed to do that. And when it comes to the younger men who are seeing that as their examples of what a leader is, they should look somewhere else. They shouldn't look to men like that as leaders, because they're not. Those younger men deserve better. And Musk, of course, qualifies as younger men. He's 24, 25 years younger than Trump. And he was raised to behave a certain way and benefit from it. And of course he did. That Wade was, of course, similar. Because there are similarities between Errol and Fred. Personality-wise, not necessarily social context. And, or political context, rather. And, Musk didn't have any male role models that were beneficial. If you look at Thiel, or you look at Sachs, and what was the other guy's name? Sam Altman. Sam Altman was the South Africans. We'll talk about the South African ones from Harvard or Caltech, wherever they were from, that uni that they all went to apparently. He didn't have any role models, positive male role models. He got taught that being a male means being bad. And being bad means being rewarded. He got told that if you game it right and make it look like you were doing good, perhaps through some kind of public relations agency doing AI videos, propagating spin and lies afterwards, then that might count for something. But they're wrong. Those men really don't care. It's absolute garbage for Musk to be saying to Trump that the big beautiful bill is an abomination after he funded the campaign, after he propped Trump in the first place, after he gutted the US OPM with Doji, and after he presumably had read the Project 2025 documents in advance of that and openly switched teams from allegedly being a social democrat to supporting that. He doesn't care. Okay? He does game theory at your expense, and he doesn't care.